For all the participants, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We'll come back to that after Brenda's presentation. Perhaps not all, depending on time, but therefore let me stop talking now and then give the floor to Brenda to share her presentation now.
Okay, thank you, Ezra. Bram, could you help me remove the bar at the bottom so that the slides fall on the screen? Okay, so I'm going to talk about food system governance, and I'll share some examples that I have seen in my country and what I did as my PhD research. And the message I have here is that we need to move beyond having the nice words, and we can still learn from the past. So usually when we talk about food systems governance, typically what comes to mind is to have more policies in place. So these are the strategies, the regulations, have other plans put in place. Or sometimes other people think, okay, we need to talk about the polity, the institutions and the structures, the arrangements that need to be in place to be able to govern the system, while others talk about the politics, which is what Chris has introduced, where we need to focus on the actors and also understand what kind of power dynamics, how are they interacting and relating with each other. Here, we need to just know that, governance is a process. It isn't just an outcome, but it is a process. And whichever dimension you decide to focus on, whether policy or the politics, will differ how it evolves over time, but also there will be differences where you're looking when you put all three dimensions on table to do analysis in terms of governance. And what has this got to do with us talking about food systems and food system transformation is because right now everyone is talking food systems wherever we are. So be it in the UN arena or in Europe or in the US or in the African continent, in the Asian continent, we are all talking about food systems and calling upon governments, calling upon different stakeholders to put in place integrated agendas, identify pathways for different actors within the food systems to be able to transform the system, and also to embed systems thinking in the different kind of sectors that they have. So there is generally all that political clout, developmental clout that we need to change, and the call has been had. We have countries that committed. So 155 countries that participated in the UN Food Systems Summit. They have national food system conveners. There were quite a bit of food systems dialogues that were held to identify pathways. 126 countries have pathways that have been identified. And there are those who say we have integrated food system transformation agendas in place. And what does this mean? It means that these are overarching frameworks that have been the layout explicitly. What needs to be done by different administrative units, so the ministries, what needs to happen there, and also they define what kind of interactions should happen in different governance networks. So that is done briefly. So why do I bring this up for the food system transformation agendas? Is because, yes, we are clapping for countries that, you've identified your priorities. These are the pathways that you're going to have. But this clapping needs to go beyond that. We need to go beyond the commitments that we are making and hit the ground with action. And I'll share with you a similar story that happened. It's now, I think, almost 15 years. 14 years since it happened, and it happened more from the nutrition perspective, improving food and nutrition security, where there was also a call to have more integrated multi-sector nutrition policies. So that's the story I'm going to share with you today, so that we and also share what kind of lessons can we learn when we talk about food systems governance. What can we learn from the past that we can use now as we move forward with this new agenda to transform the food systems. So in 2010, there was a conference a UN conference in New York, where there was a launch of a campaign about the first 1,000 days. Those are the days from pregnancy to 2 years of age for children. And there was a call for action to all governments to address malnutrition, in particular chronic malnutrition, which is stunting, in those first 2 years of life. But there was a call for a multi-sector approach. And here we have governments that were on board, the businesses came on board, we had the donor community coming on board, we had the civil societies coming on board, the UN agencies committed, and everyone was talking, yes, we need to address malnutrition within the first 1,000 days, because in the long run, if we don't address this malnutrition, we will have impacts on the economic development for the different countries. So as a result, we had countries developing their integrated nutrition and food and nutrition strategies. This is an example of what happened within the sub-Saharan Africa countries. Majority of the countries within sub-Saharan Africa have this multi-sector nutrition policy, or they have an integrated food and nutrition security policy. And here they are elaborating what kind of activities and they're going to put in place to be able to reduce the levels of stunting in the different countries, as well as what kind of structures need to be put in place. And when these were launched for each country, there were launches done by very high level leadership, both political and technical, from the sectors getting involved in this. And somehow after that, it sort of fizzled down. So there wasn't much to hear about what is happening within this multi-sector nutrition. This is where I did my research to understand from my country what happens with the Uganda Nutrition Action Plan that was adopted when it comes to implementation. And the rest of my slides are structured along these topics. The common visioning and framing, the organizing, the horizontal and vertical policy integration, the mechanisms, going beyond the paper realities, and being aware that there are policy disparities in practice. So I'll start with the common visioning. So it happens that when nutrition, just like food system transformation, healthy, sustainable diets, they are ambiguous words, and they're ambiguous concepts that can be framed differently depending on which sector you're working in, and also depending on what level you're operating, the level of governance that you're operating at. So there was need for us to be able to interpret what does nutrition mean, or addressing malnutrition mean, from an agriculture perspective, from a health perspective, from an education perspective, from a trade perspective. What does it mean in the different technical silos, as well as what would it mean at the subnational government level? And it wasn't even just that. Within the same sector, you'd find that there was a coexistence of competing frames and in the same sector. So on the one side, you find, for instance, in the health sector, you'd find they are talking about, okay, we need to address wasting, and this is what is posed by the nutrition in emergencies, so we need to deal with this. But then on the other side, there are those who are coming in and they're saying, no, we need to focus more on sustainable, diverse diets. That time we used to call it diverse diets, now sustainable, diverse diets. We need to look into that. And then on the other side, they're saying, no, we have chronic vulnerabilities that are happening in different districts that we need to focus on. So then on the side of the person who is doing planning, because of these different competitions within the same sector, what should they be able to allocate the pot of money that they have to? And this wasn't just for health, but it's also in the different sectors, in agriculture, in social development, which also makes it a bit of a challenge to plan for. Then the other thing was that there was a reinterpretation of what is meant at different government levels. So at the ministry, it is framed, nutrition is framed differently. Within the local governments in implementation, you'd also find that at the local government, they are also framing it differently based on the priorities that they have within the local government. And when you go to the private sector, in the businesses, they are also seeing nutrition, they would also framing nutrition differently from their perspective, which in a way would question the legitimacy of the policy, of the action plan that has been put in place. And also the reinterpretation was done even in the very donor circles where the support was necessary. So that's one of the challenges that we also foresee within transforming food systems. What do we mean by sustainable, healthy diets? On the other side, there is also the need to understand, yes, we have our food system transformation agendas, but when it comes to implementation, government is organized in technical silos, in domains that we have to explain what do they need to integrate, but also within the policies that they have. There are some ministries that had goals that address nutrition, and then there are those who had tangible actions that can be budgeted for and implemented and monitored. However, we saw that there were variations within the different sectors, that there are some where we have goals that are clear, actions that are clear in 1 year, and then in the following year, when you look at the kind of plans and budgets they have in place, then you no longer can trace where are these activities. And this is something that would come up with, if we are not really explaining what we mean by food system transformation, the tangible actions that need to be put in place, then we will fall into the trap of having nice goals being set, and we don't see the tangible activities that need to be put in place. And another thing had to do with the coherence across different governance levels, across even the sectors themselves. And I'm focusing on government because that's where most of my research focused, but there is also coherence that is needed from more in the private sector domains and also in the civil society domains of other activities that we are doing, complementing each other. Are there any tensions that are being raised by the kind of activities or competition by the kind of activities that we are doing? And who is engaged in this? So I delved into understanding how come certain sectors of government do integration in 1 year, and then in the following year, there isn't as much nutrition integration in there. And who is driving this integration or disintegration that we see within the governments? So I went into understanding what kind of mechanisms, and why is it important to understand the mechanisms? Is because when you know the conditions or the actors who are involved, what challenges they are addressing, now repeating Chris's words, then we can be able to identify where the opportunities to leverage and what are those conditions that you would want to stall so that they don't advance because they lead to disintegration. So here are some of the processes that I saw from Uganda and for the sub-Saharan Africa countries, is that the integration that we saw in the policies, the adoption of the food system transformation agendas that we see, there is a great deal of international policy promotion that is happening by donors, by international NGOs, by research organizations that are internationally based, who are promoting this. And governments are responding. In some cases, there is an incentive of finances for them to adopt, but in other cases, it's also that there are these long-term linkages, relationships that have been created, so there is integration. On the other side, there was the issue promotion by experts within governments. They understand the system of government. They are strategically positioned. They can be able to lobby and advocate and share the evidences that they have. Then there was also the role of learning from policy implementation, so learning from the past and using this learning to modify how the policy, to make a case for integration of nutrition across the sectors. On the other hand, I looked into what brought about a decrease in integration within the policies, and there was a leadership turnover. 1 year you have this expert, this leader within the ministry who is who is converted, you can put it in quotes, who is converted, they are lobbying for this, and then they change. There is a staff turnover. So then integration in the following year or period might not be seen. There are tough wars where, I mean, when we talk about food system transformation, then you'd see that there are those actors who will feel threatened and they will try to protect their turf. And the same we saw within nutrition, that when we brought in more sectors need to come on board, other sectors that felt nutrition is traditionally theirs, like the health sector, they came in to really try to resist other sectors coming on board in this. And lastly, there was also something that I call a blame transfer for decreasing the integration, where sectors feel that does not belong to our domain. I think it belongs more in the agriculture domain. They're the ones supposed to come on board. And that is something where we may fall into when we talk about food systems transformation. On the European side, we did this exercise also on the European side, and there were mechanisms such as scientific lobbying by academics, but also by companies, people who want to leave a mark. So one wants to make a mark in this policy area, which is supporting integration. That is about the policy on the papers. But we need to go beyond these policy papers and go into implementation. And this is how the way I like the graphic because it really shows how we are organized as a society and also as government is organized. There are those who are making decisions at different levels. And here another dynamic comes into play. When it comes to implementing these paper policies, other actors are coming on board, and I'll call them street level bureaucrats, or you can also call them frontline workers. And they are also actively involved in developing policies because they are translating what government is putting into place into implementation. And I found that for the case of Uganda, because there is also reinterpretation that is happening for the frontline workers, they are involved in implementing so many other activities also. If you take a case of an agriculture extension worker, they are not just focusing on ensuring production, they are also ensuring that they have seed or inputs available for the farmers. They are also looking into post-harvest handling, some of them disease management. This is one officer who is handling all this. And on top of this, you're putting on, or you need to have nutrition-sensitive agriculture, or you need to consider sustainability within the things, within the actions that you're doing. How do the frontline workers respond? Either they are bundling activities, so that is the practice, either they are bundling activities, so everything fits in there that we are requesting them to do, or they are doing their richer task performance and they say, I'm an extension worker, I don't need to really engage in other activities if they are not funded. And we also found, I also found issues of down prioritization, a practice that because there is so much that is being demanded of this frontline worker, then they will not prioritize activities that are not funded. So there is really down prioritization. Or they will implement, but they will look for what kind of gaps exist where probably you're not as requesting for particular indicators or not looking into certain processes, and those activities will be down prioritized. And others simply not getting involved at all in these activities. We need to think about the leadership at the implementation levels to ensure that there is that sustained leadership. And this is not just leadership from government, but leadership in different domains. We are all leaders in one way or another. And be it food system transformation or just speaking nutrition, this is necessary. Just like resources are key in all the things that we do, financial resources. And my conclusion from this looking what happens beyond the paper realities was that governance from the bottom, in a way, is what is shaping the outcomes that we are reporting at national level, the indicators that countries are reporting. From other than the nutrition, I've also looked into, so what is responsible for sector transformation, and in sectors like seed sector transformation, what are some of the factors there that have been responsible for the changes that we see in those sectors? And one thing that came up was capacitating the agency of different actors, investing in both their technical capacities, but as well as their functional capacities. Things like Chris talked about multi-stakeholder partnerships, those collaborative processes, the leadership processes, trust building processes, they really help to contribute to having transformation happen within sectors. It was also an observation that I saw within from the nutrition arena. And there was the role of boundary spanning actors. These are actors who can share, reframe, reshape, redesign the same idea about nutrition or the same idea about food system transformation for different audiences, and they're operating, they're navigating different boundaries to engage, to make sure that people have that collective contribution towards transformation. And the boundaries are also spatial. So you're going across the technical, but also the spatial boundaries. And lastly, there was the adaptability and the responsiveness to the uncertainties. In my study for nutrition within Uganda, I also saw that the local governments that had say instances of drought, they had to adapt how they are going to deal with these instances of drought within their context. This example is also possible as we talk about food system transformation, that there are always going to be uncertainties, there will also be pressures from different directions and volatilities, so there is need to be more agile. So to recap, and things that we need to think about as food system transformation agents and leaders is one is to look at when we are making the decisions to transform systems wherever we are, we need to learn from the past, to zoom back, understand what are the processes of change that have happened over there, and how can they inform future trajectories of transforming the system. I set them in terms of challenges because this is what we face, we are going to grapple with. The second one is about the need to move beyond nice words to action on the ground. Paper policies alone, paper tigers, they are toothless lions if not put into practice. The third challenge is about sustaining commitment in implementation, that, political commitment needs to be cascaded lower. And even as commitment as individuals, we need to cascade it into actual action. And lastly is that the capacitating of the agency of the people, it's also going to be a challenge because we're also determining what suits which kind of actor depending on the domain that they come from. So that is it from me.
Thank you very much, Brenda, for this very nice presentation.